What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Steelers Breakdown Podcast. Nick Farabaugh here, back with you. Mandatory minicamps tomorrow, but it ain't ready just yet. And so we got another day, and I got my good pal here, the other half of Steelers Afternoon Draft. As I said, we're going to be on this podcast on Friday. The man himself, Zachary Smith, Smitty, in the house. How you doing, brother?
What's going on, man? I appreciate you having me on. I made a joke with Alan about it, saying that I feel like I should have been the one to be on here first, but I did it. I did
Yeah, man. Alan was on here
it.
Friday. We talked Aaron Rodgers.
Well, you know what? Yeah, so I'll say this. It worked out because it let him get all the Rogers conversation on here. So we can talk about other things because he took care of all that business.
Yeah, I originally wanted to have Alan on to talk OTAs, and we did talk OTAs, but we talked mostly about Aaron
Mhm.
Rodgers. And I was like, I don't really want Smitty on to talk Rodgers. I want to talk maybe Rodgers adjacent things because we're going to talk about wide receivers today, and we're going to talk about who we want to see them add, and out of the options that are honestly not that great, who would be the best option. So let's talk a little bit about this. Wide receivers. I mean, I'm not really putting a lot of stock into the Jonnu Smith, Kyle Pitts stuff. They've called
Mhm.
about him, from what I've heard, not very likely on either of those players. So let's throw out the Jonnu Smith, Kyle Pitts side of this. We've talked about those players. Here's a few realistic options I can list off to you, Smitty, right now. Gabe Davis, Keenan Allen, DJ Chark, Amari Cooper. That's in the free agency pool. In the trade pool, I mean, who even is there? Terry McLaurin's got a contract situation going on, but I think we all anticipate that ending with the big long-term extension in Washington. Um, I guess Alan Lazard, but sure sounds like from what I've heard and who I've talked to, he's going to stay in New York. I don't expect him on the block. And then everything else we talk about, Green Bay, Tampa, Denver, Houston, doesn't really feel like a trade's likely there until August when they know who is kind of on the outs. Where
Mhm.
in the world do the Steelers go to get a wide receiver two or another wide receiver three here with Rodgers in the house?
Yeah, we actually got a question today that Alan and I were talking about an afternoon drive where somebody brought up the Patriots room as well, kind of throwing them in that bucket. No matter where it's coming from, the rooms you mentioned, I mean, I would consider Romeo Dobbs or Dontavian Wicks like a relatively significant upgrade for this room. Like a guy that you know is going to be a two or three, but any of those other ones where you're waiting for like roster cut down day or something like that, sure, you're probably going to get a better option, at least in the receiving game, maybe not necessarily as a blocker, but at least in the receiving game than a Robert Woods at this stage of his career. But unless that guy's playing in like your top four, I don't know that I would consider them a significant upgrade. You could certainly find somebody to add to the room, but I just feel like a lot of Steelers fans are probably setting themselves up with disappointment with who like a realistic option is on the market. I mean, we can consider them making calls to Romeo Dobbs or Dontavian Wicks. Do we feel like those are even going like there's a relative shot of that happening? I don't necessarily know that I do. I mean, I think the Patriots one is certainly an interesting one to watch. You look at Kendrick Bourne's contract; he's actually got some decent salary attached to it. Signed a new 3-year deal before last season. Now he doesn't have the guaranteed money next year, but I think New England, like with the way that their roster's set up, you got a top four that you feel. I feel like assuming that everything goes well with Stephon Diggs and you can get him to the season, keeping his head on straight. You feel like between him, Kyle Williams, like a Pop Douglas. And then they just signed Mac Hollins, so I don't think that he would be on the outs already. There's your top four, but then you got like Jalen Polk, you got Javon Baker, you got obviously Kendrick Bourne that I brought. I think that's a room to watch that we should be talking about more.
Yeah, Kendrick Bourne's an interesting type of player. I mean, Jalen Polk, I like coming out of Washington and struggled last year though. Going, Javon Baker was like a non-factor.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it's a weird room. I mean, none of those guys to me present 100% certain upgrades. I think Bourne probably could be the best of those, depending on how Polk kind of comes along. But I mean, again, even when we talk about the Buccaneers, Jalen McMillan just did not click in his rookie year. Trey Palmer took a real big step back last year. When you talk about the Texans room, I think you're, talking Mechie and Hutchinson. I mean, those guys make some sense if they're on the outs.
Here's what I'd ask you about them though. And I'm not saying that this should have been the case, because now it's a different coaching staff and everything like that. And the Steelers might not view it the same way the Texans did. But if those guys couldn't command like significant roles ahead of Robert Woods in 24, what makes it going to happen in 25? You know what I mean? I
Yeah,
think that's a fair question to pose.
I do think it is. And that's what I always come back to. The non-Dubs Wicks options are always, at least Bourne has a proven season of a legit play and
Yeah.
run in the NFL. He's dealt with some injuries since, but he does have some legit run. I think that's the issue I have with a few of these players. Mechie and Hutchinson a lot more potential than they are actual production. And
Mm-hmm.
so all this kind of comes down to say this market's pretty dry. I mean, do any of those free agency names really interest you that much? I think honestly, right now, I don't think there's any question about it. The known names that are on the market, because are Dobbs and Wicks even going to be traded? Christian Watson's coming off the torn ACL. He's not ready for the season. They don't have to trade him. That could be a trade deadline thing that they do. I know they have Golden and Savion Williams there, but
Mm-hmm.
someone has to be out of there, but only before
Yeah, not right
Christian
now.
Watson is back, right? If he's gonna miss, the first 4 to 6 weeks, and he may, with that ACL surgery recovery, then they're just gonna keep those guys probably. So no guarantee those guys become trade candidates. And then I look at the receiving options on the market, the free agency market. I mean, listen, I don't think anyone's getting, super excited for Gabe Davis and Keenan Allen and Amari Cooper at this point in their careers, but compared to the trade options, I do think there's at least some ways to talk yourself into those players. But I don't love any of those
Mm-hmm.
options.
I mean, you saw Amari Cooper have a really nice season as recently as 23. Now, what happened last year? Um, that to the wrist injury and everything like that. But I feel like you saw him take a step back in terms of his ability to create separation too. I mean, we're talking about one of the best route technicians of your and I's generation of football between him and Keenan Allen, another guy that I think at his age, more expected, 34 years old, you would expect that you're going to see him start to take a step back. I think the one thing Allen and I were just talking about this was the biggest difference is if you go back and watch Amari Cooper, a lot more contested stuff like Allen was still open a ton, and I don't know if it was just maybe a better understanding. Maybe he saw more zone coverages, a better understanding and feel of space, but he was the more productive of the two. I don't know that the tape necessarily was that much, better than Amari Cooper's, but he was more productive. If you just look at the box score, 700 yards, 7 touchdowns last year. The point in me saying that was I don't know that the tape necessarily speaks to him being that much better, but certainly more productive last year. I mean, Gabe Davis now about to take a fourth free agent visit, and I think he's going to get the same answer from the Saints as he did from the first three, where it's like, not right now. Like, you're coming in, we're going to get a look at you. We'll be in touch maybe later in the summer when you get that knee right and everything like that. But who knows what that timeline looks like for him? And who's the other? Oh, DJ Chark was the other one that you brought up.
Yeah.
I mean, at one point, to me, a very interesting player. I thought he was a little bit underrated in his time with the Jaguars, and certainly was a point in time where I felt like he could be a contributor. He fits out of the group in terms of for sure a guy that plays on the outside. But I mean, to me, the least proven track record, the least body of work, and some real questions about his ability to operate as more than a wide receiver four at this point, in my opinion.
Yeah, and injuries. Another thing with him.
Sure.
He was hurt a lot last year with a hip injury. Keenan
Mm-hmm.
Allen, I just watched the tape. I mean, just no juice left in his game. There's no
Yeah,
explosiveness or speed.
Allen used. He said it looked like he was just running in mud all year.
Yeah, he really did. He has no speed whatsoever. Now he was productive, but wasn't an offense that did have DJ Moore and Roma Dunze not having great years, and he did at least still produce. So
Mm-hmm.
listen, is there maybe a way he could still produce? Sure, but he's a slot only player to me at this point in his career. I can't really see a lot of outside production from him. I think with Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson, that makes things a little more dicey when you're looking at fit. I think Cooper would be potentially, in terms of profile, the best dart throw to make because he is that route runner type. When we're talking about Rodgers, the quick winners that he needs, I love that phrase used by Derek Bell. That's he said Rodgers loves quick winners because the quick game's so prevalent in his game. And DK
Mm-hmm.
Metcalf is just not a quick winner, right? He's not really a route runner that routes you up and wins in 2 seconds. Um,
Sure.
very different from, Deontay Johnson, who was that, for example. Um, but Mari Cooper could profile as that, but I mean, he was getting outstepped by Mac Hollins last year in the playoffs, and you just look at the Buffalo tape, and man, it's just rough to watch. Like it's tough.
Yeah.
Gabe Davis, while not really the profile of a route runner type, I think at least has a role I can talk myself into there. Big
Mhm.
blocker,
Yeah.
downfield threat. Like I understand I'm not like giddy about Gabe Davis's game, and I never have been necessarily. But there's a clear role that fits this offense. So I understand that in Gabe Davis, even if he's not a needle mover. So what I'm trying to say to a lot of you guys is I think the Steelers are going to search high and wide. They better hope somebody comes loose here because I don't think the profile of the options out there right now is very promising for them. It's very possible
Mhm.
we're at the same spot where they were last year. So Roman Wilson,
Mhm.
I think, ton of pressure on him to have a step up. And I mean, you know, the world where Bobby Trees is getting the Van Jefferson 25 to 30 reps per game, is he a better version of Van Jefferson? Probably. He's got better hands, I think. He's a better blocker. But like you're not trying to get marginally better than Van Jefferson. You want a huge upgrade there. And so
Mhm.
this kind of, to me, goes back to one of the criticisms of the offseason. Why didn't you sign somebody else? If you knew you were going to trade George Pickens, why didn't you draft Alec Imanor in the fourth? Like that's,
Yeah.
we've always talked about that. And I just think that is a potential issue here for the Steelers. But we'll see. I don't love the wide receiver options, Smitty. I think it's just rather
Yeah.
barren right now. And you're taking a dirt throw on a guy that's maybe a little older or is injured often, like a Davis or a Shark, rather than taking a kind of pragmatic approach and preparing for a George Pickens trade that you were going to make.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that the timeline, the way things went down, but like they knew they were trading George. Like, especially if they could get the day two asset back, they knew that they were going to trade him. So while the timeline might have not been what people expected of it happening during the draft, so there's going to be some people that said, oh, they didn't know that that was going to happen or that offer was going to be on the table. You got to prepare that somebody's going to make you that offer and you're going to move him, though. So I've talked about Ayumanor a ton in terms of I felt like that should have been the pick over Jack Sawyer. There were still other receivers, though, obviously on the board too, that they could. I mean, I don't want to expand this conversation even more, but even like slot corner, I thought would have made more sense in the Jack Sawyer selection. But it's the route that they want. And it didn't seem like they prepared for what was the fallout was going to be in the wide receiver room because of that. And it's a second straight season that this has happened, second straight offseason where we're talking about the building, if you will, of the wide receiver room, the construction of it. And I don't know. It's just hard to talk myself into. This goes back to honestly something that's more than the receiving room. There's just obviously the transition for Broad. Come back to receiver room, but transition for Broderick obviously to left tackle, banking on Troy's health, and obviously I'll throw Roman into that bucket. Calvin either doing or doing more than what he did last year. There's just so many ifs, if you will. Like, is it within the realm of possibility that these things happen and the Steelers have it like a serviceable wide receiver room? Sure. But these to me are things that you would rather have be, hey, if it happens, great. But if it doesn't, then we're not in a place where they need to happen. The
Right.
Steelers are in a place where those things need to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been worse last year if Calvin Austin didn't have as many breakout, which I
Right.
think is
Yeah.
crazy. Is it better this year? Is the room better this year? Sure. Is it much better? No. And I don't think you want to compare it to last year. And
Well,
so,
and that's the thing. A couple of names you brought up there, like I just wanted to circle back to this because the Alan Lazard thing. I agree. The information that's been put out, the reporting has been, not that he doesn't like playing with Aaron. Obviously, he's been super productive, but like it's time to kind of like prove that he can do it without him. And this is his opportunity to do so. But like, say it's a real possibility for the Steelers to acquire him. I don't think that should be a guy that Steelers fans are like turning their nose up to,
no.
like because they're either going to probably do worse or nothing if it's not somebody of that caliber. So,
Yeah.
and I'll say the same thing. Like if Gabe Davis's knee checks out, it's weird because to me he's an Arthur Smith type wide receiver too. Like where again, like low end, but like he's an Arthur Smith wide receiver two that we've seen have as a wide receiver two in the past. But like it's interesting because then the Aaron Rodgers thing, and he's not necessarily an Aaron Rodgers type of wide receiver too, where Aaron likes to, go five wide at times and have as many routes run as possible by guys. So like I think it would certainly be an interesting fit, but like schematically, at least what we think this offense is going to look like, it makes sense.
It does. And so, listen, they could wait until the cut down day and maybe a Tim Patrick and a Noah Brown are there, not
Again,
those specific names,
as we talked about last year. Oh, okay. I
but
was
like,
just saying
but like,
it's the same
yeah,
players.
right. But like last year, those guys popped loose, right? Noah Brown from the Cowboys went to the Commanders, and then Patrick from the Broncos to the Lions. I felt like that was a big missed opportunity for Pittsburgh to add somebody those rooms. Not, Brown was hurt and was on pace for about 600, 700 yards. Tim Patrick was a really solid blocking, dirty work type of guy that ended up with about 400 in Detroit. Like, listen, those are notable type of ads I think that you can make on the margin. So maybe there's somebody that pops loose here that the Steelers should be all over, and I think that's also something to watch when you kind of take everything into consideration. But we'll see. This wide receiver room is an issue, and we'll see kind of how it works out. You were talking about slot corner for a little bit. I do want to mention
Mhm.
this because a lot of people have asked me about it. Jaire Alexander just got cut by
Yeah.
the Green Bay Packers, Smitty. I personally, I understand, wanting to add the talent that is Jaire Alexander. I think this is so far from being likely. I think it is just, I don't like pooping on people's parade, but guys, I don't think this has a chance of happening for what I've heard and just examining it on paper. But Smitty, I want to get your thoughts first.
No, I mean, I agree. I understand. Like, it's weird to me now that there's articles being written where they're being listed. Think people looking back at the pre-free agency interest and probably combining that with the age of Darius Slay and thinking that it makes sense. But like, I don't know, like if he was if we've seen more of a body of work of him playing in the slot, if we've seen more of like good results, Joey Porter had played like what five or Darius Slay, I'm sorry, played like five slot snaps last year in Philadelphia. When Joey's done it, it hasn't looked great, and certainly like his profile certainly is somebody that should be playing on the outside. And I think you want to continue to develop him out there. I'm with you. I don't think it makes sense. I understand people that are like, hey, anytime that you can get your hands on a talented player, like, are they going to be interested in whatsoever? Maybe have an internal conversation, potentially. But again, it's going to come down to me where it's like the role that they could offer him, the money that they would be willing to invest in the role that they would give him here is not going to be anywhere close to the top of his list. So it's not happening.
Right. I just think it's an odd fit with Slay and Porter. I think I think people throwing out push Slay into the slot just not going to happen. Um, some people were like, well, could Slay go to the rotational? Why would Slay take that? Probably request his release.
Dude, like people again, it's because of the age. I get
Right.
if everybody, if all three of those players had the exact same season they did last year again this year, Darius Slay's the best player out of them.
Mm-hmm. It is. And the other thing is, it feels like a lot of the arguments to sign Jair are the arguments as to why they should not have signed Slay rather than to sign Jair. Um,
Yeah.
it's like I understand like not wanting to sign Slay because he's 34 and 35 and is probably going to retire next year. Like I understand
Mhm.
that you want a long-term kind of option, but one Jair needs to prove he's going to be healthy if he wants to be a long-term anything. I think he's going to be a one-year deal with somebody heavily incentive-based probably. He's played 14 games in the last 2 years. I mean, this guy needs to stay healthy. One, when he is healthy, he's been great. So I understand the kind of intrigue there. He's been a very high-level player. But one, he barely plays in the slot on top of that. The last
Mhm.
3 years, last 3 or 4 years, I think he's played like 100 total slot snaps, if even that. Not
Yeah,
much there.
I brought up to Alan that he did it a little bit early, and I
Yes.
think I don't have the college tracking for snaps, but I think like Louisville had him doing it a little bit too. But yeah, like as of late, it really hasn't been, and now you're asking a guy that's dealt with some injuries to go into the slot and play a
Yeah,
more physical role, like so that's kind of hard for me to envision.
it is. And I think Jair will want to stay outside to get paid more than slot corners. Um,
Yeah.
and there's too many cornerback deficient teams in this league that are not there. Someone's going to offer Jair a starting role on the outside, and the Steelers can't offer him a guaranteed starting outside corner position, and they can't. And I don't think if Jair, you're looking at Jair, one, that's appealing, and two, why would Jair want a slot go into the side of the slot when he can play outside and say, I don't know, Miami, Minnesota, those two teams really stick out to me. Minnesota, Miami. Miami's going to trade Fitz
Minnesota get a shot at playing Green Bay twice.
yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. You look at Minnesota's room, I mean, it's Byron Murphy and a bunch of other cats. Some really
Mhm.
intriguing players, but Jair would instantly upgrade that room. Miami, when they trade Jalen Ramsey, going to have a huge hole there. Jair at least gives them someone with upside to be corner one. Like, there's just a lot of things. There's a lot of teams that are going to offer Jair a better role than the Steelers can offer him. This isn't happening. I'd be stunned if it did. And I understand why people don't want didn't want them to sign Darius Slay. But to be quite honest with you, it's going to take a huge drop off, in my opinion, for Slay not to be better than Dante Jackson. I
Oh
really
yeah.
believe that.
Well,
So
and here's the other thing that I want to real quickly just say too is say they didn't sign Darius Slay. Imagine the conversation we would have been having about Warner all year up to
yeah,
this point. And then if you sign Jaire, you obviously got to be like, okay, this guy's played 7 games each of the last 2 seasons.
yep,
Like
got to be
I
healthy,
think we
man.
would be criticizing Omar for that role, route as well. So while I understand people that would have rather have had, the various wards of the world, because I was somebody that was pushing for that one to be how they opened up free agency. They got again, if every corner that was available or is currently on this roster, even if you included Alexander within that conversation, has the exact same 2025 as they did in 2024. Darius Slay was the best one. It's just
Yep.
his age is kind of is saying at some point this guy's going to fall off the cliff. Is it going to be this year?
Yeah, I mean that's the issue. But it's just hard to envision them signing Jaire at this point. It really is. It's an awkward fit, and it's hard to see Jaire's motivation to come to Pittsburgh when there's going to be more better opportunities elsewhere. I think Miami. This screams Miami to me. I think that's probably the likely
Yeah,
landing.
I mean, it seems like they're 100% in the trading Jalen Ramsey, which like
Yep.
you look at the rest of that room, and my goodness, like who's even the second best player in there? Cam Smith.
Yeah.
It's not a good room. So yeah, they could certainly benefit from having a guy like that too. But it also just like raises the question to me: you just gave Ramsey a new contract last year. Why even in this position? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just odd.
It is odd.
It's a Dolphins
I mean,
podcast.
if you want to talk about some corners Steelers sits on, slot corners, I mean, I think there are names. Asante Samuel Jr. is coming off offseason surgery. We'll see how that works out. That's a later signing probably. But I mean, even then, you have Kendra Fuller is out there. I mean, I think he could be an interesting name for
Well,
them.
and they showed obviously with Slay, like, Kendall Fuller's what 30, 31,
Yeah.
somewhere around there, but like they're willing to sign guys of that age and push chips into just 2025 and 2026. So yeah, I mean, the Fuller's the name that I've brought up is like if they're going to add a vet, I think that that's the route they should go. But
I don't know if they're gonna though. I think
yeah,
Beanie's got a shot here to
yeah.
do what he wants. So we'll see. But I did want to end this off with some fun talk before minicamp. I've seen
Mm.
now 2 weeks of OTAs. Smitty, you've seen absolutely nothing of OTAs, which makes this fun.
Yeah,
Some sleepers.
I just get the secondhand info. That's what I get.
Yeah, you get it from Alan, and sometimes I'll text you things. But who do you think who are you looking at as a sleeper? If you want to go sleeper back and forth, one sleeper, I'll go a sleeper. Let's do three each.
Well, we're spending time talking about obviously the slot corner spot. And I looked at a guy like Sebastian Castro, who's a UDFA, but I don't think that the safety depth is so deep, nor is it at slot corner where this guy is going to be pushed out. Like I think he's got as good of a shot of the UDFA. Like it's basically the same conversation as Beanie Bishop last year. Like, and I know it's funny because that could end up being the same position, but Sebastian Castro is a UDFA. I think has the best shot of the UDFAs to make the roster. He's somebody that we talked quite a bit about. I was very surprised that he ended up being a UDFA, even with him taking a step back in 2024 as opposed to his 2023 tape at Iowa. But I thought he could have been a day 3 pick, and I wouldn't have questioned it if he was. So yeah, I mean, he's the first name that I'm looking at here.
Yeah, Castro's an interesting one. I did talk about it on here when I talked to him. He said he's only playing safety right now, so something to think about there. I don't know.
Yeah, again, like I am, I get it because you're talking about a UDFA, like maybe not putting so much on his plate. I would be surprised if, like, at some point, maybe not even in mandatory camp, but like training camp, I think that you're going to see at least some of that there. And that's me making a prediction, but I'll go on the record saying that I think you're going to see some time there for him there.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by that. The guy I'm going to actually put out there is also a slot corner who actually played a lot of slot corner
Mm.
OTAs, and I feel like he's gotten lost in the shuffle, even though he was picked by the Steelers. Dante Kent, I think that's a guy to keep an eye on. I'll tell you what, I didn't know what to think about Dante Kent when they drafted him. I did some research into him, and he was, ball hawk, the pass deflections, the ints, the forced fumbles, even his ball production is just through the roof when you look at it. Also allowed, I think, the second most explosive plays over the last 2 or 3 years
Yeah.
in college football.
Hmm.
So he's a bit of a Deron Bland type, where it's big time plays or gives them up. But I tell you what, man, in in OTAs, this guy was balling. I thought he looked really
Mm,
good. He made a few PBUs. He just looks comfortable in the slot there. I think that's going to be his main spot. So he's going to be Beanie's primary competition. But I think people are kind of thought that was like a throwaway pick, and maybe he didn't have much of a shot to make the roster. I mean, he could easily very well be the backup nickel. We'll see how much. I think eventually Brandon Echols is going to start pinching into that a little bit. He started out
yeah,
saying that he was going to be outside, but
yeah.
uh, told me on Thursday that I'll tell you what he told me, Smitty, on Thursday. Eccles told me that they told him that they're going to move him into the slot a little bit this week. So
Okay, all right. So I might have to change what I just said because my answer regarding Castro and my prediction of him doing that was not accounting for Eccles do it because I heard
yeah,
Eccles talked about in the past that he had only been outside. So okay, if that's going to happen, maybe we don't see it, and Castro really is only going to be a safety. But
yeah. I mean, I think Castro could still make it as a backup
yeah,
safety, anyways. But
hmm
we'll kind of see. But yeah, Dante Kent, I think, played really well. So we'll see where he kind of fits in. So that's my first sleeper. Who's your number two?
I got to give, I might be stealing one from you here because you were actually the one that put me on to this. Uh, Sticking with seventh round picks of the Steelers.
Mm,
And the battle that I am most looking forward to, in all honesty, is the off ball linebackers. I'm going with Carson Bruner. I
okay.
think you put me onto his tape and said, this is a pick that Steelers fans aren't going to like just because of the last name and think it's a Nepo pick. But like this dude should have been drafted. It's completely fair value for him to the dude, like watching him move in space, like you see a lot of things that can definitely translate to today's league and what they asked of off ball linebackers. I think what makes it so interesting to me is he's obviously going to have to play teams, and I think he'll be able to transition fine to playing special teams. But you look at the likes of Mark Robinson, Cole Holcomb coming back from injury. Obviously, they signed Malik Harrison. We know Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, year two leap. Like that room is so full right now. How is it going to shake out? But Carson Bruner is a super intriguing guy to me that I can't wait to watch in the preseason because of what I saw him do in space at Washington.
Yeah, I think he really started for the first time last year, but his tape was really encouraging. He's been a team's guy for years, so that part of his game is there.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a real chance, I think, to make the roster and become something at least. He's a good dart throw late in the rounds. I know. I told people that, the Bruner last name, everyone was going to yell Nepo pick, and I mean, was it probably that? Probably. But I mean, I actually like the player, so we'll see. I actually, when I watched him a little bit, I saw some, North Carolina Cole Holcomb there. I really did. So we'll see kind of how that kind of works out. The other sleeper that I've mentioned him about 20 times, I feel like on this podcast, but I'm gonna keep saying his name because he deserves it. DJ Thomas Jones. This guy, I'm telling you, has a chance to make the roster. He is a absolute nosed, like hard nosed, put your head down type of guy. Easy kid to root for. He does the dirty things. You turn on the South Alabama tape, and he's just caving in sides of the line at times. I mean, he is full on just destroying edge rushers at times on tape. It's inconsistent. It needs to be more consistent. But man, when he gets it, he gets it. As a receiver, he's not going to bring a ton, but as a fullback, tight end, wing,
Mm-hmm.
H back that can do a little bit of everything plus play on teams, he's athletic enough. He doesn't look out of place. Obviously, there's not a ton you can do in OTAs when you're not in the pads, and that's kind of your role. But he made some catches that I thought were impressive as well, showcasing soft hands. They got, I think, something here potentially in DJ Thomas Jones. So let's see how he looks in training camp when the pads come on. Let's see how he looks in the preseason. But the South Alabama tape kind of paired with what I know about him and what I've seen. I'm intrigued by him. I'd actually say he's probably got the best shot out of the UDFAs right now to make the team.
Which is obviously I brought up Castro. Even a couple of the receivers, like depending on who or if they add to that receiver room, could certainly be part of that conversation. I mean, whether it's Rock Taylor or Montana Lamonius Craig, I think is an interesting one to watch too, just because Lamonius Craig, what he did at Arizona with like the crossers and stuff that they had him run. Now
Yeah.
that Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback, as opposed to somebody like last year, I think it would have been an awful fit with a guy like Russell Wilson who never targets the middle of the field. With Aaron now in tow, that's like the type of receiver that could make more sense. Like he could be a bigger bodied running like Alan Lazard type stuff
Yeah.
for Aaron. So I'm not saying that that's going to happen or anything like that. But I do think it's a really interesting group of UDFAs this year because the names that we had already brought up and those UDFA receivers.
100%. Is that your final sleeper? Those two?
Yeah, I was going
Okay.
between the two, but
Okay.
because of it being Aaron, I'm going to go with Lamonius Craig. I think the skill set's
Oh,
a little bit
dude,
more
Lamonius
for him.
Craig made an unbelievable catch from Will Howard on Thursday. They were both talking about it. I mean, this dude made like a diving one-handed catch in the corner of the end zone. Still somehow got his feet, and I was like, ooh, who the heck is that kid? It
The
was like
other dude at Arizona.
that
Yeah.
was like unbelievable catch. Um, I'm looking down the roster right now, and I'm going through some of these names because I wanted to pick something. I'm looking to try and pick someone that maybe people don't know about. And I did name this guy, when we were talking about initial sleepers, for
Mhm.
OTAs before this. I did name this guy because I feel like he's been lost in the shuffle, but he probably shouldn't be. I'm going to name Dylan Cook. I feel like people don't
Mm.
remember Dylan Cook as much. And I remember 2 summers ago, even last summer, there was buzz about him because he played really well in the preseason in 2023. Last year, he had a Liz Frank injury and spent most of it on the practice squad. He can play four different positions, everything but center. Um, he's a former quarterback, highly intelligent, has really good movement skills. The footwork is there. This is a guy to me that has legit upside to develop into something. Now, this is going to be a critical offseason for him, obviously, and hopefully he stays healthy because last year he would have been a roster lock had it not been for the Liz Frank injury he suffered in the joint practice. He was having a really good training camp. He had a really solid first preseason game before the injury. And so Dylan Cook, to me, a guy that people aren't probably talking about enough in the slot, in the swing tackle kind of department. I know
Yep.
everybody expects that to be Calvin Anderson because he got a 2-year deal, and I think fair
Hmm.
play. But I think, we're talking about guys that can make the bottom of the roster and maybe turn into something. I mean, that's the type of guy you look for, the background specifically and the movement skills. They fit the outside zone scheme Arthur Smith runs. So I wanted to bring him up as kind of a veteran. I think people just are kind of forgetting about a little bit, but Dylan Cook's a solid player. I wouldn't forget about him.
Yeah, I mean, going back, like you said, the way that he had looked in the previous preseason, I kind of thought like he was destined to just take over that swing tackle spot when Trent Scott left for Washington. Like I just assumed that that was going to end up being the role
I
that
think it
he
would have
fell
been.
into, and was going to find a home there. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the injury. The thing with Calvin Anderson too, though, like, I mean, fair play to him. We talked about this like off the record, obviously we were not expecting to see him in that playoff game against Baltimore. Encouraging moments for him. I'm not saying he's the answer at either tackle spot if one of these guys go down, but certainly some intriguing snaps there, and I would give him the edge. Certainly, that contract should carry a little bit of weight, I think, in the way that the roles shake out too. But yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Alan and I were praising Dylan Cook and couldn't figure out, when they waived him last year, the whole way that that went down. So
Yeah.
stick
Yeah.
out.
I mean, they were lucky he probably wasn't claimed. But
Yeah.
he's a guy that has some interesting traits. I would keep an eye on him. Wouldn't surprise me if he makes the roster. I know a lot of people are like slotting in like Aiden Williams and some other performers, but if Cook has as good of a training camp and a preseason as he was having last year, because he was having a really good preseason last year and would have been a roster lock. He would have been the swing tackle if he didn't get hurt. Let's see if he
Yeah.
can do it this time. That's going to be a big part of it. All right, folks, thanks for watching. Smitty, thanks for coming through. Let them know where they
Appreciate
can
it, man.
follow you, read your stuff. I guess you don't write you podcasts, so where they can watch your stuff.
Oh, but they got to get all my great tweets. I mean, I might as well be writing with my long format tweets that I put out sometimes. But you can find at Zachary Smith PGH on all my social media platforms. And then yes, Monday through Friday on the Steelers Afternoon Drive comes out right about 6 p.m. with my guy Alan Saunders over at SteelersNow.com. And then I also do another podcast, Steelers, Pirates, and Penguins, called Around the 412 with my guy Tyler Weeks over there, and that's literally just around the and then the code 412 for Pittsburgh. Find that on all the listening platforms or on YouTube.
And make sure to go check that out. Smitty does great stuff. Folks, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell for more here from Steelers Breakdown. Make sure to go read the stuff, penlive.com/Steelers. We got a lot of stuff coming there. Of course, tomorrow, minicamp, I will be there. I'll have all the takeaways you may want, I'll have all the Aaron Rodgers quotes you really are salivating for, and much more. So thanks for watching, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow, and tomorrow I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about. So thanks for watching, everybody.